Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Taimur Shamil. This week was very active on the foreign policy front. Prime Minister Imran Khan was visiting China, where he met the Chinese Premier Xi Jinping. Both countries talked about cooperation and also strategic ties that are there between Pakistan and China. A lot of things came under discussion. A lot of areas of cooperation came under discussion. The most important was Kashmir. And Prime Minister Imran Khan thanked the Chinese authorities on their cooperation on the issue of Kashmir and also on the economic cooperation and the strategic cooperation. It is notable that China backed Pakistan on the letter that was written by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi to the Security Council mentioning Kashmir, an issue between Pakistan and India. And because of that support as well, after 50 years, Kashmir was discussed in the Security Council. This is certainly very important. Both countries are working on China-Pakistan economic corridor, a mega economic activity, and both have been striving for peace and stability in the region. Afghanistan too came under discussion because a peaceful Afghanistan would mean a peaceful region, and China-Pakistan economic corridor going through Pakistan is certainly also a concern for the Chinese authorities as well, because any miscalculation, let's say, or any trouble going on in Afghanistan can hamper the progress on China-Pakistan economic corridor and also on China's ambitions in Middle East and tapping the potential of the markets in Middle East. Prime Minister Imran Khan would also be visiting Middle Eastern countries, the Gulf states, this week, in the coming week, today and in coming days. He would be visiting Iran and Saudi Arabia, since there is this rift and tussle going on between the Gulf states, and this would be a very crucial point in terms of Pakistan's relations with the Gulf states, with Iran, and also with Saudi Arabia, who have been at rift with each other for quite a while now. And we are going to discuss about that thing, Pakistan's relations with Iran, Pakistan's close relations with Saudi Arabia as well. One is a neighbor, another one is a very close strategic partner. And we are going to discuss about the foreign policy options for Pakistan, addressing all these issues, relations with China, the issue in Afghanistan, relations with India for that matter, and Iran and Saudi Arabia with our special guests. Let me introduce them. On Skype, we are joined by Lieutenant General Naeem Lodhi, a renowned senior defense analyst and expert on Pakistan's national security. So, welcome to the show. In the studios, we have renowned senior diplomat, Ambassador Durrani. He is expert on Pakistan's foreign policy. Welcome to the show, Ambassador Asif Durrani.
Thank you for having me.
Then we have Hassan Akbar. He is an analyst and also director of Jeddah Institute, a public policy think tank based in Islamabad. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Taimur.
Hassan. I'll just start my discussion with Lieutenant General Naeem Lodhi. So Pakistan and China both are close allies. Prime Minister Imran Khan was visiting China this week. I just mentioned all the points that he discussed with the Chinese authorities. Pakistan-China cooperation and Xi Jinping's visit to India. How do you see this foreign policy and this diplomatic activity in the region?
Thank you very much. I think it was a very timely event. We all know that as far as China is concerned, Pakistan and China, they have deep strategic relations, and for a very long time, and very reliable ones. They have gone through ups and downs, but never you would find any variation as far as this relationship is concerned. There were two things, I think, which were important as far as this visit was concerned. The first is, normally there were certain apprehensions in certain quarters, even in Pakistan, that after the American U.S. visit of our Prime Minister, as if there was some slowdown in CPAC, or there was some lack of warmth, or some warmth has gone away as far as China-Pakistan relationship is concerned, which was misplaced, of course. It was the wrong apprehension. It had to be alleviated, and for that, this visit was very important. And secondly, as you said yourself, that President of China was to visit India, and I think it's a great sign that if just prior to going to one country, immediately, heads of the state of another country, they come and visit you. That gives a lot of credence to the fact that we have very deep relations with them. So whether it was for some mutual consultation or to show to India that what relationship China carries with China, and then with the Pakistan also, just look at the how potent was the statement which came out after the meeting. China is saying that we will stand by Pakistan in all its national interests. Now, this is not a small statement. It is politically very vibrant, politically very potent. It is militarily very potent. So I think and then what all is going in the region, you mentioned it, Afghanistan and Iran and all these things. I think a very timely consultation, very well received in China, in Pakistan, and it is going to have a very sobering effect in a sort of imbalance which is being created by the connivance of India with some very strong powers. So that way, I look at it as a very positive development, and it will have very far-reaching effects.
Right. And Ambassador Durrani, this statement that China stands with Pakistan on its core national interest certainly is a very important statement, and optics matter a lot in international relations. Prime Minister's third visit probably to China, and going very frequently to China, especially after UNGA, even on the sidelines of UNGA, Prime Minister was very open about Pakistan's relations with China. Prime Minister was talking to different think tanks in the United States. Pakistan's relations with China at the moment, after the abrogation of 370 and 35A by the Indian authorities, this situation in the region, how do you see this visit?
Well, with regard to China, we have no doubt about the strategic importance that the two countries give to these relationship, and our relationship have stood the test of the time. Even when during the Cold War we were under pressure from the Americans, and Pakistan stood by China, and China stood by Pakistan. So there's a long history of standing by each other. And in the recent past, when you have just referred to Indian action of abrogating Article 370 onwards, China's role has been excellent as a strategic partner for Pakistan. And it, in fact, has reinforced not only the friendship, but also the emerging dynamics in the regional context. And this is going to, in fact, go a long way in setting a tone for the future relationship which will emerge in the region. And it has also served, you can say, if not warning, but as a signal to, strong signal to India, that they cannot make any move without taking into account the ground realities. In this case, by abrogating Article 370, they have to look at the wishes of the Kashmiri people, and also since Pakistan is a stakeholder, so they have to look at that. India apart, Pakistan-China relationship, as General Saab has mentioned, it is in fact entering into phase 2 of the CPEC. And in that case, it is the takeoff stage. And now we will be focusing on special economic zones, which are going to in fact play a very vital role for the economic upliftment of Pakistan. And here lies the hard work which has to come after and from the Pakistani side. And I think that was a reminder from the Chinese side that if there's a slow pace of movement in materializing those projects or completing those projects, so here is the time that Pakistan should now, in fact, put all its efforts in full gear.
Right. Yeah. And Hassan, at this point, when Pakistan and India both are the members of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, this too is a platform where countries discuss about the integration of cooperation. This point that Ambassador Durrani just raised up, very important point, that such kind of actions that India has taken in Kashmir, the abrogation of 370 and 35 of their constitution, would not be received well by the countries in the region, you know, Pakistan and China. And Xi Jinping is now, in the Chinese premier, is visiting India. How do you see the situation going on at the moment?
I think the situation after Article 370 is very clear, which is that, let's not forget, China is a party to the Kashmir issue. And although it's a small part of Kashmir which China has and is disputed with India, nevertheless China is a party, and China has raised concerns about unilateral actions by the Indians to change the status of Kashmir. So I think that will definitely be a talking point in President Xi Jinping's meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. China has also come out quite strongly in support of Pakistan. As you mentioned, it supported our move at the United Nations Security Council. And we see that in the future, China has, through its statements in this visit, Prime Minister Khan's visit, has pretty much said that they are going to stand by Pakistan in the future as well. So I think as all of the participants have said, there's no doubt about how deep our relationship is with China, and the importance of that relationship for Pakistan, both within the region and globally, I think is very clear. On, the SCO is a very important new formulation, relatively new formulation, which is still in its relative infancy in terms of regional cooperation, etc. But we see this as growing. On counterterrorism, there's growing cooperation between SCO countries. There's a lot of potential on economic cooperation. And so it's good that, both India and Pakistan are members of the SCO. And it can also provide an alternative crisis management mechanism, I feel. Right. Let's not forget that for a very long time, we had the US and other regional great powers playing the role in some ways of a mediator in during crisis between India and Pakistan. That role of the US has diluted now. I think more so because of this inclination of the United States policy community towards in the Indian perspective and India's role in the Indo-Pacific strategy for the US. But now we see that countries like Russia and China and even Saudi Arabia and the UAE have played a far more effective role in managing bilateral relationships between Pakistan and India. So as we face a crisis situation in some ways and an escalatory situation, the role of these countries, I think, will grow in the future.
This is a very important point. And General Lodhi, talking about this whole situation and the diluting role of US in the region, as Hassan said, do you see it that way? Because India stands as the odd one out in the region. There is this regional cooperation going on. Pakistan and China are working on China-Pakistan economic corridor. There's a huge potential in the region for economic and trade potentials. But the abrogation of 370 and 35A brings in a different kind of mood in the region. Do you think that India is realizing this, or do you see India getting in the other camp perhaps? How do you see the situation?
America is still a superpower and a very strong power of the world. But what Hassan was alluding at, that is very right, that because Americans have put their weight on the side of Americans, on the side of Indians, so they are no more neutral. And that is what I keep on cautioning the government and other officials, that please do not rely on the arbitration of America, because they are clearly in partnership with India, as our partnership is with China. And it is only transactional in nature, which has been left as far as America is concerned. We would like to have good relations with them, and we are still striving to have that. But yes, now America, in case of Indo-Pak arbitration, is not a very reliable partner. We'll have to add to that consortium Russia, China, Turkey, other countries, so that if at all a time comes of arbitration, which is not in sight for the timing. As far as the Indian intransigence is concerned, you see, India may talk to Pakistan on any issue, but what we have seen in the last 70 years, that they will never talk to us on Kashmir unless they are in trouble. They have talked to us on Kashmir a number of times, starting from 47, 48, and then 65, and then later on, but only when they were in some distress, in some trouble, under some pressure. So the only two factors which are going to bring any modification in the attitude of Modi and India.
I would just put this question to Ambassador Durrani. Ambassador Durrani, this cooperation of Pakistan and China, but India stands as the odd one out in the region, because if we are, let's say, working on regional cooperation and economic cooperation, and India is focusing on abrogating 370 and 35 and showing aggression that we saw earlier this year.
Well,
how is this going to go along?
There is a history, and the history is that now the present dispensation in India, everyone knows, even in Indian, there are voices that it's the Hindutva ideology which is now ruling, and they have a specific agenda, and they have been following that since their inception in the mid-20s in the last century. So they have tried, and in fact, when you talk about Kashmir, since there is already alienation, since Kashmir is a dispute, and since Pakistan is a stakeholder, and since Kashmiris there is a complete alienation against India, so India wants to make Kashmir as an example in order to suppress and in order to repress the Muslims in India. So this is a dangerous agenda. It's even the Indian objective commentators, they are quite now vocal about it, that it is actually, it would cause the unraveling of India. It would, in fact, would be very dangerous, not only for India, but its neighbors also, because the way the hatred they have promoted in the country. So I think this would also call upon the regional states, especially the powerful states like China, Russia, and also, in fact, Pakistan is, since Pakistan is a party. So there is a need for mediation. There is a need for arbitration, would be a later stage, because in arbitration then you have to accept whatever decision is made by the arbiters. So they in fact, they decide about your fate. But when we talk about mediation, is that first you have to resolve the dispute. Now India is not coming to that, and that is the intransigence. We have to look at the intransigence of India, and then that needs to be addressed. And that's why now, if you have must have read about, India is taking punitive action against Malaysia and Turkey, because they spoke about the Kashmir dispute, the right to self-determination of the Kashmiri people. So they spoke for justice, and this is not acceptable for India. So India is following a dangerous path, and this would be, in fact, not, it will not favor India, it will not favor the region. In not favor the region, when I say, it means then it will cause more tensions.
And this is very interesting. Akbar, Hassan, what drives India's, let's say, this aggressive outlook at the moment? Is it their cooperation with the United States, their defense pact, security pact, their trade with the United States, and perhaps do you see them in the American camp, or there's another, let's say people call it a camp, that is China and its allies in the region, or that this is India's purely independent, let's say, strategic appetite, what they have done in Kashmir? How do you see it?
No, I think that in my view, let's not forget history. India traditionally has been, relatively independent in terms of its policy decision making. So I think that's very important for us to highlight. So I think there is strategic appetite within India. I think it comes from this sense in India that they want to become the regional hegemon and achieve global power status. And in order to do that they want to flex their muscles now that they've become an economically powerful country. They see themselves, they want to enter the UNSC, etc., the nuclear suppliers group. There are various forms in multilateral forums at which India wants to gain access to. And what they're doing in Kashmir is a reflection of that power. And a little bit of hubris, frankly, in the Modi government, which feels that it has both the domestic backing and the international levers and international power to do what as they wish in Kashmir and in the rest of India. So I think it's driven primarily from internal strategic interests and internal domestic political interests. But I think it's facilitated by an environment globally which sees India as a counterweight to China, where India is a part of the US strategy in Indo-Pacific. And that makes it difficult for many global powers to raise, and especially Western powers, to raise their voice against the atrocities being committed by Indian troops in Kashmir.
We'll take a break, and after the break we are going to discuss about Pakistan's interest in the Gulf, Pakistan's mediation between the Gulf states, Iran and Saudi Arabia. Prime Minister would be visiting Iran and Saudi Arabia. The rift is there, but the implications of this rift can be very serious for Gulf itself and also for Pakistan, because Pakistan has good relations with Iran and with Saudi Arabia. Anything going negative in Gulf or in the region would hamper the peace prospects, let's say, or the stability in the region. We are going to discuss on this point after this break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The situation in Gulf is getting precarious at the moment, in a sense that the issue that is going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia is of concern to Pakistan as well. And Prime Minister Imran Khan will be visiting Iran and Saudi Arabia later. Pakistan wants to mediate, and the reports are that on the request of the Saudi authorities, Pakistan would be mediating between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Both are close partners and good friends in the region. And having peace and stability in the region would benefit all. The Prime Minister would be visiting Iran, as I said earlier, and Saudi Arabia. General Lodhi, how do you see this visit of Prime Minister to these two countries and the situation at the moment?
All right. I think it is just a stroke of luck, or I think nature's way of doing the thing, that Pakistan, in spite of our shortcomings, like economic shortcomings or internal problems, we keep on appearing as a very important player once it comes to the stability of the region, and once it comes to doing something between various Muslim countries. So that is what has happened this time also. Although we must need to understand that it is not easy to carry out any arbitration or carry out any trying to to bridge the gap, the Gulf between Saudi Arabia and Iran, because their tensions are historically, they go back to very ancient times. And also we need to remember that America and American allies are also partners and players as far as this thing is concerned. So it is not an easy task that the Prime Minister has taken upon himself, and let us, all wish him good luck. But it is not going to happen, in my opinion. It will not be able to. It will not happen in one or two parlays. It is going to take some time. But if it is initiated, which we are quite confident, because you have heard Foreign Minister of Iran, the statement has come. We'll also see what statement comes from Saudi Arabia. If it starts happening, it is going to take some time, but it will be very important responsibility again on the shoulders of Pakistan. I'm sure that very soon this responsibility will be shared by others also, because Pakistan alone will not be able to do a lot as far as this thing is concerned. As I said, that on the other side we have many players, and on the Iran side also we have some additional players like China and Russia. So let us hope for the best. It is a start of a process. It is going to be a long process, and I had wished that instead of calling it a visit to carry out this sort of arbitration or mediation between the two countries, we should have just called it a goodwill visit to Iran and Saudi Arabia, thanking Iran for their support which they had given earlier, not in UN but earlier through their parliament and through their president and all that. So that would have been much better in my opinion. But anyway, nevertheless, great responsibility, a very important responsibility, and Pakistan again emerging as an important player of the region. Let us hope for the best and pray for our Prime Minister and for the process ahead.
And Ambassador Durrani, this situation, this visit to Iran and Saudi Arabia, the durability, let's say, or the how long this process would go. Pakistan would be mediating or visiting these two countries off and on, as General Lodhi was saying. How do you see it?
Taimur, I think it's too early. We shouldn't, in fact, jump to the conclusion right now. It is just the beginning, and beginning is that, in fact, Pakistan, since you also mentioned earlier, that we enjoy best of the relationship with both with Iran and with the Saudis. And Iran is our direct neighbor, and both countries stood by each other. There is no dispute between the two countries. There might be some differences in perceptions, perhaps. But with Saudi Arabia, we have around 2 million Pakistanis working there. We have emotional attachment because of the Harman Sharif, and we have been strategic partners with the Saudis ever since Iraq occupied Kuwait. In fact, even before, Saudi armed forces were trained in Pakistan. They are still being trained in Pakistan, especially their officer cadres. And we have had our troops under the bilateral agreement in Saudi Arabia when there was a threat during the Gulf War. And we still have the remnants of our troops there. They are in the training role. So the Pakistan's presence has been there. And it is just not the first mediation effort. If you recall, during Iran-Iraq war, Pakistan was part of that delegation of the OIC for mediation and for cessation of the hostilities between Iran and Iraq. Subsequently, then we did mediate between Iran and Saudi Arabia when Rafsanjani and then Crown Prince Abdullah, and they had 4 hours meeting in Islamabad during the OIC summit in 1997. The third mediatory effort was made in 2016 when then Prime Minister and Army Chief, they visited Iran, and they had, and that was the time when Saudi embassy was burnt down in Tehran, and temperatures were quite high. And now this is the time, and this is the time it is happening. When in 2016 it did not take off, reason was that Saudis were quite angry with the action the Iranians had taken. But Iranians were ready for the mediation, and they had appointed their focal point. But now this time it is happening because the situation is getting very serious, especially after attack on the Saudi oil facilities in Abqaiq, and Aramco is the largest oil producer. So this has given a signal that with one missile, with one attack, 50% of Saudi oil production capacity was out of market, and it was almost 6% of the global production. So this must have given serious signals to all stakeholders, even to Iran, that if they start targeting each other's oil facilities, while Iran was accused, but there was no evidential evidence. Houthis did claim about that, but again, since the Iranians have been supporting the Houthis and they have been involved in that whole affair, right, so the blame goes to Iran. So therefore, it is very important that instead of deciding their disputes through war, in which, mind you, Saudis have already lost $300 billion during the past 4.5 years in war with Yemen. And now they are still counting their losses. And UAE almost $100 billion.
And this goes on.
This goes on. So this is very important. And for Iran, again, under the JCPOA, when United States withdrew from the nuclear deal under the JCPOA, so Iran is squeezed economically. Their oil production, their exports from 2.7 million barrels per day has come down to around 400,000 barrels, and that too, that is under pressure, and that too, Chinese have taken the stand. Even then, Chinese have cut down their imports by 2/3. So these are important, factors which are coming together, and they are playing a role. In that case, now where Saudis and Iranians can go to, Iranians can't go to the Americans, they can't go to others. They may go to Russia and China, but perhaps because of the JCPOA, those two countries had taken a stand, so they may not be acceptable perhaps to Saudis. Same is the case with Saudis. Where Saudis will go? To whom? To the Americans. So Americans are not acceptable to the Iranians. So when you look at the whole, jigsaw puzzle, then Pakistan fits the bill. Janasa was saying that we are economic problem. Economic problems are temporary.
Strategically.
United States itself is indebted to China to the tune of $2.5 trillion. So our economic woes would be over. That's for sure. Reason being that when you take correct measures, then you can. But at the same time, but strategically, Pakistan's importance cannot be underestimated. It has never been. When you talk about Afghanistan, Pakistan facing the Soviet Union, now facing American pressure, in fact, and then again facing the pressure in the Middle East when we were under pressure. So Pakistan's role as a mediator, in fact, suits Pakistan, and in fact it suits the status of Pakistan that we should be pursuing.
A very comprehensive analysis. And Hassan, our experience in Afghanistan, we have seen this long war, and war benefits nobody, no one. War, let's say, in the Gulf would benefit neither Iran nor Saudi Arabia, though Yemen is a big issue for both, for the Gulf states as well, for us as well. Globally, if something goes wrong in Gulf, the global market of oil would also crumble and all that. Pakistan's mediation, Pakistan's role, let's say, in this situation, how do you see it?
I think it's a positive role, certainly. I think it also solidifies Pakistan's neutrality in the dispute between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The problems are many, as General Saab mentioned. It's a historical. There's a historical animosity. There's no territorial dispute, but there is a competition for strategic access and strategic strength in the rest of the Middle East between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Comprehensively dealt by the ambassador. But I think that this situation suits mediation because, as was mentioned earlier, the war in Yemen, I think, is a key element of this mediation. It's not worked out. It's bled Saudi Arabia and the UAE, both in terms of money as well as men. And, I believe the Saudis may be looking for a way out. The attacks on the oil facilities, Aramco facilities, were very serious in nature. And, many people expected a retaliation from Saudi Arabia. But I think the Saudis have, wisely chosen to take a more, subdued stance on the issue. They were very clear from the outset. They didn't come outright and blame the Iranians for it. They said, we're going to investigate, etc. So I think that shows that there is a lot of potential for mediation and for finding a way out between both Saudi Arabia and Iran. A conflict between these two powers in the Middle East will lead to a wider conflict because Saudi Arabia and Iran has influence from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq into Yemen. And Saudi Arabia also has influence in all these areas. So naturally, any conflict will create further problems for both Saudi Arabia and the Iranians. And I think the Saudis realize that, the fragility of their main source of income, which is oil exports, is clear from what happened last month. So I think the Saudis also want to ensure safety and security for their, main economic input. And the Iranians understand that, if there is a level of, cooperation, if not cooperation, mediation that they can have with the Saudis, they can at least isolate one aspect of the troubles that they're facing in the wider Middle East. Because you see there's the Iranian issue, the Israeli issue for the Iranians, there's the US and the larger alliance that the Iranians are facing in the wider region. So I think resolving the Saudi and the Gulf dispute and issues would be a key breakthrough for the Iranians also. And clearly they cannot afford to do the kind of actions that they could earlier because they're facing severe economic crisis in Iran as well. So given these circumstances, I think there's clearly some potential for at least immediate conflict not breaking out between these two countries. Now, whether we can resolve the more long-standing disputes or issues, concerns between both these countries, I think is premature. because those concerns will stay. But I think Pakistan can play a very effective role in both demonstrating to both partners that we are neutral in this issue, which is very important for Pakistan, and that we would like no immediate conflict to break out in the Gulf, in the Persian Gulf and in the wider region, because that affects Pakistan's strategic security in many ways. So I think it's a very positive forward step.
And General Lodhi, how do you see the situation? Because we see that both Iran and Saudi Arabia, they are backed by two big powers. Saudi Arabia is backed by, as we all know, United States. Iran backed by Russia. And as Hassan was just telling us about Iran's influence in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia's influence in the Middle East. What is the role of these big powers in this whole conflict?
Of course, we do understand that as far as the competition between US and the opposite group, Russia and China, it continues. But one big lesson which I have learned from this entire situation of Iran and Saudi standoff, and of course with their backers along with them, and that is how cleverly Iran has applied the concept of deterrence. Actually, if we go into the details, Iran has deterred a war which some powers wanted to impose on her. That is a great lesson for Pakistan. It clearly demonstrates that instead of appeasement, if you go for a policy of deterrence and you show yourself that what all you can do, it operates much better, and it is much more effective. So I think all said and done, it's a very good omen for this region, and I am sure that the peace with each step, with each passing day, the way there are more parleys and more people going in between these two countries, it will bring more peace in this region, and we will keep going away from at least this potential conflict which was there between these two countries. Both sides have realized that what all can go wrong and what all they will be suffering. So I think this is one good news, and let us just wait for the other good news from Afghanistan, and then you will see there will be a big change as far as this region is concerned. And we hope and we pray that the way we are thinking, the way the things are moving, even our internal dynamics, at least in the economic field, as the brother was indicating, we are improving in that direction also. So let us hope and pray that good days are coming for the people of these regions, and we can see prosperity because of all these moves.
This point is very important because having wars in the region, we have seen that firsthand, directly. War in Afghanistan, aggression from the Indian side. Now there's another. There's potential of a conflict in the Gulf. The way Pakistan has been balancing all these issues in the region, how do you see it diplomatically?
It has, and I think Pakistan has now experience of 4 decades as far as Afghanistan is concerned. And dealing with India is almost 7 decades. And then we have been into this so-called two-war front situation, at least for the past 4 decades. And yes, we had to sacrifice men and material. Almost 70,000 Pakistanis have sacrificed since 9/11 onwards. So still the tensions are there. Our eastern border is still hot, at least line of control, and Indians have been violating with impunity. Yes. So we cannot say for sure that how India is going to behave at the moment. But on the Western front, again, we are facing this problem. It has been controlled to a greater extent, and thank God that now it has brought much peace along our borders, and also those saboteurs have been neutralized. Afghanistan itself, yes, right at the moment there is you can say, a freeze. But it's going to, recently there was a positive development in Islamabad when Zalmay Khalilzad and Taliban delegation, they visited. In fact, they also had some interaction also. So some positive movement has taken away. under this backdrop, coming when you are looking at Pakistan in the Middle East context, then we also have to look at the greater picture, which is greater Middle East, which is under turmoil. In fact, if you look at the problems in the world, so the greater Middle East is actually the center of all problems. And there is war-like situation or anarchy or civil war situation you will find, whether it's in Syria, it's Libya, even Egypt is not, in peace
recently.
And then here, when you look at Iraq, Iran, and then Iran versus Saudi Arabia, and then again Turkey. Turkey has problems with its southern borders in Syria.
Syria and Kurds. Right.
So in that respect, Pakistan is the only country which has no disputes with these countries. Even in terms of the differences in perception, Pakistan's point of view has been respected. You say with regard to Iran, even with the Saudis, there could be differences in perceptions. So, and Pakistan and Turkey, they have been supporting, they stood by each other throughout, whether it was Cyprus, we supported them, and whether it is now Kashmir, Turkey has been forthcoming. So, herein lies Pakistan's actual role, and it automatically comes up, because when they look around these countries which have the dispute, so for them Pakistan becomes a natural mediator for them, because they all have confidence in Pakistan. No one can say that Pakistan betrayed their confidence. So this is the biggest asset for Pakistan, to which I think we should play our role, and we should continue to play our role. There could be certain glitches, there could be some roadblocks, but irrespective of those roadblocks, we have to move forward, and we should continue the effort.
Yeah, very well said. Hassan, how would you sum up this situation, that the position that Pakistan enjoys, as Ambassador Durrani was saying, with the Middle Eastern states, with the Gulf states, and how can we utilize this position better to have peace and stability over there, and also the way we have been avoiding, major conflicts in the region?
No, I think it's very important. You see, Pakistan is a heterogeneous country in many ways, and we have various kinds of links with the three major centers of power in the greater Middle East, which is Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, in my view. So we have links with all three of them, and certainly we are playing that role. Right. I think what General Saab mentioned is very important, because I think Pakistan can learn lessons from how Iran has worked or played at the world stage in the last decade or so. And if we link that with an earlier remark of General Saab's, which I certainly agree with, which is that India hasn't talked about Kashmir unless it has been brought onto the negotiating table. I think therein lies many interesting aspects of Pakistan's policy in the future, or what Pakistan can do to create an environment where we can not only have peace on our western borders, but also seek some kind of negotiated settlement on our eastern side
as well. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Lieutenant General Naeem Lodhi, thank you for your time. A pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for joining us. Ambassador Durrani, pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Hassan, thank you for joining us. Pleasure having you on the show. That's all from today's dialogue. See you next time. Khuda Hafiz.